Sit down, Gabriella. It really is a moment for you, a moment of decision. I can't emphasize enough that this apartment is just unbelievable. You will feel, Gabriella, it is like going on a journey from the sidewalks of 19th century old New York to the sidewalks of Florence and ending up back in New York again in the 21st century.
I actually might just prefer the 21st
So
century.
this is really your place, Gabriella. Just look around for a second. Imagine I am not here. Imagine your daughter running around saying words in Hungarian. Imagine her coloring books and smiling. Imagine she would grow up in this apartment. What a wonderful childhood she would have. Imagine the smell of your favorite food going through the apartment from the kitchen to the dining room. Perhaps a goulash. Your maid will be getting ready with dinner while you're just having one of the finest champagnes in a soaking tub with your husband. Imagine waking up every morning to these views. Gabriella, I really see you living here.
You don't have to try to convince me, Edward. I love it here so much.
I'm so happy you feel this way, Gabriella. I know how it is. Just tell your husband every morning and every evening that this is really where you want to be. He loves you and he wants you to be happy. I'm sure he will not say no to you if you let him know this is really your first choice.
Thank you, Edward. That woman on the video is me, viewing that $85 million apartment in Manhattan. Well, she's sort of me. She's a persona I created called Gabriella, which is my actual middle name. But let me tell you, how did I get there? I'm not actually a billionaire. I'm an artist and an architect, and my whole story really started with the biggest cliché. I was in New York for 3 months in 2016 on an artist residency program. And like anyone who goes there, I went up to the top of the Empire State Building, and I was really amazed with the views. And so, as soon as my gaze was going up from the tiny cars and the tiny people to things at my eye level, I started to notice that there are buildings which are higher, or at least as high, as the Empire State Building. So I started to think that someone might be also standing there, and maybe that someone has the privilege of standing there every single day, unlike me or other tourists around me, who has this experience only a couple of times in a lifetime. So I started to have this big desire to go up to all of those places and see the city from all these different perspectives. So I started to draw a map for myself, I started to walk the city, and I picked out 25 specific buildings that I really wanted to go to. And it was very quick to realize that all of these buildings are newly built in the last decade, ultra-luxury residential skyscrapers, which is a very secluded, untold, and secretive universe, really only available to the very, very few who belong there. So I realized I have absolutely no way of getting into those places. But because I was in New York for 3 months, I really immersed myself in this obsession. So I had 2 options. I forget about it, or I become someone who's granted the access. And thinking about it further, my only real choice seemed to be to pretend to be an apartment-hunting Hungarian billionaire. This way, I even could pick which floor in which building I wanted to go to, at least from the options that were available on the market, either for rent or for sale. And the access was instant. So I started to check real estate advertisements online. I created a fake personal assistant for myself named Coco, and she would call up the agencies to make appointments for me. And the first question Coco always would get is, who is Gabriela's husband? So I also needed a husband. Zoltán, my good friend from Budapest, volunteered to be this person. He's not exactly a billionaire, but he has a few attractive businesses, which when agents Googled him, were kind of fine, and they let me in. So before the viewings, I, of course, had to buy new clothes, shoes, all those things. From my bag, a journal titled Luxury Listings was sticking out very visibly. It felt a bit like a caricature of a rich woman, but it somehow worked. And so, in full makeup like this, I emerged from my dark basement, short-term rental Brooklyn apartment. And I went to the subway, all the way on the first viewing to Chambers Street, from where the apartment was about 100 meters away. But I really wanted the agent to see that I'm getting out of a cab. So I took a cab for this distance. Of course, no one saw it, but at least it put me in the mood. And so some of the apartment viewings started at specialized sales galleries, where they would show you a video, a fancy video of the property. They would give you dried mangoes and any drink you wanted, and then they would take you up. In other cases, they just directly took you up. They also handed in my hand a great deal of marketing material, which then became a bit frustrating for me because my initial goal was to take pictures of these places. And the only way these places lived in my mind is in a perfect, sunny summer afternoon. But that's not how they always are, obviously. So very often when I went up to the apartments, you could see maybe the next building, but in some of the penthouses, which were higher than anything in the area, sometimes I was in the middle of a cloud. So the views were just this. So because of that, in quite a few places, I had to go back more than one, sometimes more than 2 times, to see what I wanted to see. And so during all these viewings, Gabriela's persona evolved quite organically, guided by all the questions the agents posed to me. If they would ask me, do you have a chef? And I would spontaneously answer, yes, of course. So from that point on, Gabriela had a chef. Or they would ask me who is the designer of my clothes. My answer would always be a Hungarian designer. And so, guided by all these questions and some of reality, for example, Gabriela was also an architect, and very often I said my real opinion about the properties, came out this persona. But quickly I realized that actually, even if I showed up in my pajamas, it would be just fine. And it's not only about the clothing. Any strange behavior you might exhibit in this context, it's just seen as normal. For example, a few of the agents noticed that the camera that I was supposedly taking pictures for my husband with was an old film camera. But by simply saying that I got it from my grandfather, who urged me to document all the special moments in life, I more than got away with it. It made Gabriela an artsy billionaire, and the agents immediately started to talk with me about the new permanent collection at MoMA. So, as I was going through deeper and deeper this whole universe of the ultra-luxury real estate, the more and more problematic things I found. One of the striking things, for example, was the difference between communication between me and my husband. So when I would go alone to the viewing, all the communication about business was somehow directed at him through me. They would instruct me of what should I tell him when I go home about a particular apartment. So I oftentimes felt more like a messenger rather than a buyer. And it even more so came out when he was in fact present. To him, they would always say how great investment this apartment is. I got the attention in the kitchen, in the kids' room, in the huge walk-in closets where all the agents would make the same joke, telling me that they really hoped my huge clothing collection would fit in here. So it really felt like they are trying to convince me through the lifestyle and through emotions, whereas they try to convince him purely through the money. And after not that much research, it became very obvious why. Currently, 90% of the world's billionaires are men. And 85% of the so-called ultra-high net worth individuals, who are people with a net worth of over 30 million US dollars, are men. But this convincing tactic even came back when talking about the views. So to me, they would say that I should imagine waking up with these views every morning. I should imagine myself emerging from the freestanding soaking tub while seeing the city. Whereas to him, they purely described how, thanks to these marvelous views, the real estate will keep its monetary value. But there were other things that they were trying to convince you with. This view, which is one of the last ones I photographed early 2020, is the private residential club in the Central Park Tower, which is currently the tallest residential tower on the planet. It's roughly 100 meters taller than the Empire State Building, and this will be the tallest viewing point of New York, of course, only for its residents. So, and this is the same space from the other side, overlooking at the actual Empire State Building, but from a bit above. And so in every single apartment, there were unique things that they made you feel that this is what you really need to buy. And it's really like a race of how it's going up. I remember in 2016, in one of the developments, they would tell me that the private residential restaurant has a Michelin star chef. In 2020, in another development, they told me that the private residential restaurant has every 2 months a different Michelin star chef. So after seeing a few of these apartments, let alone hundreds of them, you really realize that they are all the same. In all of them, as you enter, it's straight into the living room where you get the best view of the particular apartment. The second best view is always from the master bedroom, which is very often a corner view. You always have high ceilings, you always have glass facades, you always have huge white wall spaces for your art collection, which you of course have. There's also sculpture corridors and very specific type of kitchen layouts with a breakfast bar in the middle. And the only thing that was a bit different in all of these apartments is the type of marble they used as a backsplash of your freestanding soaking tub. Sometimes it was Calacattatucci, other times Grigio or Robico, but really no other differences. And another thing I will never forget is the surprise on the face of the agents when they asked me if I will live in this apartment, if we decide to purchase it, and I said yes. They always went out of their way to let me know that almost no one lives in that building, and most of the service will be only for us. But of course, these apartments are not really made for living. These apartments are made to keep their buyers' money safe. Not surprisingly, this phenomena of this mode of development came in the last decade, when after the 2008 financial crisis, wealthy people, realized that they really need to keep at least some of their wealth in safe places, such as ultra-luxury real estate in safe economic areas like New York. So, as a result of that, they estimate that 70% of the actually sold apartments are empty at any given moment. Also, there's the data that shows that people who own one of these apartments, on average, owns 5 of them globally. So they are at least not in 4 of them at the same time. But The problem with this mode of development, at least in my view, is quite essential. While historically it's been churches, offices, and other forms of communal existence that shaped our skylines, broke the engineering records, today it is these buildings. They are the ones you can see from every single hidden corner of the city. They are the ones that's going to stay here for the future and talk about us as a society. And they are not only disturbing visually or psychologically, giving the message to the rest of the citizens that this is what you're never going to see, but you really have to look at them. But they are also casting huge shadows over the cities, or to other people's up until then sunny living rooms. For example, in the south side of the Central Park, completely changed the flora and the fauna since these buildings got there because of the lack of light. Not to even mention the human experience. And so, as a result of this project, I invited architects, artists, curators, sociologists to write texts about this phenomena. And together with all my photographs and the conversations I had between the real estate agents, I published this fancy album titled Private Views, a high-rise panorama of Manhattan. And so, what I would like to leave you with is that an ideal city cannot be dominated by high-rises that only serve to symbolize private surplus wealth, at least in my view. Thank you.